We're making a name for ourselves.
I saw Wolf of Wall Street again last night.
Yeah, that's kind of unfair that you had a second viewing. I was thinking about how this whole thing is going to be sort of through an unbalanced prism.
But you know, honestly, it makes no difference. I had exactly the same experience I had the first time, and I'm still kind of overwhelmed with...
Yeah, were you any more either bored or not bored, like bored or exhilarated? Like, did it?
No.
Did it play at all slower? Same exact pace.
I was kind of amazed by the momentum. Like the
Really?
momentum over 3 hours. Like I was even trying to see like how does he do it? How does Scorsese do it? And I don't know. It's like some weird kind of master filmmaker alchemy.
Don't you think the momentum in this movie? I mean, when you compare it to Goodfellas and Casino, your door is doing some ghost world stuff over there. We have a spook.
Oh, it's one of these. Okay.
That would have been better if we were talking about like Insidious or something.
Well, I mean, it's been a while
what's funny? Don't you think the energy comes from purely like the performances and the texture of what they're like the conversations more than the like in Casino? The camera never stops moving and the lights are flooding in, and it's much more like a visual montage. Not that there isn't that here, but I feel like where the energy comes from here is the manicness of the characters.
It's definitely the same. Well, it's that mix of like really fast, snappy voiceover. You know, Leo talking to the camera, you go into the past, go back, you know, into some story, then it rewinds and you see another bit of the story. There's like a total, that amazing confidence and freedom of movement within the narrative. You know, it's, and then, like you said, actually, when we spoke about it, how, you know, scenes just, they don't end where you think they're going to end. They kind of just go on. Well, I'll let you say it, but like you well, what did you say?
Well, my feeling, what I thought was special about the movie was there's a narrative in there, and it's very classic and somewhat familiar. But every scene, if it's just about efficiency of getting out information and getting to the next plot point, could have been a minute, and every scene was about 10 minutes, and that's the pleasure of the movie. That's the magic of the movie because that's where the magic comes from. And it's like, I think it's magic on twofold. One is there are very few filmmakers operating at commercial budgets, $100 million budget, who can even get away with it. You know what I mean? Like, especially if the movie were an hour and a half,
do you mean you get away with it creatively or through the studio system?
Any system, even equity. Like, there's so much a 3-hour movie is by definition less commercial than an hour and a half or 2-hour movie. So on these sort of parameters of pressure, but even having the confidence to get away with it and say, you know what, this movie plays at 3 hours and people will get through it, and realizing it would actually be more boring at an hour 45. The movie would have been somewhat flat.
It's true.
Whereas
if you actually cut some of those scenes and made them shorter, the movie might feel longer, but it feels so breathless 100%. And insane. And well, watching it again, I was like, there is not one moment that I would cut from this. There's not one weak scene or somewhere where it lags, or it's just this constant shark.
And you get to know these. I think part of why the movie works is he's really indicting these characters and the world and the culture they were sort of a part of, and yet I think he is letting you love them. Like I love
Leo, though. That's the key. Like I feel like what I love about Scorsese and I mean basically it's always the same movie. It's you know the kind
exact same movie. It's Raging Bull. Even.
It's like the total excess and kind of you know characters on the periphery of society's rules who kind of just live as however they want to live through all their bad behavior and impulses and appetites until it crashes and they become an ordinary schnook. You know, like that's...
What's amazing is he treads a very fine line of really letting you enjoy the wish fulfillment, both, you know, Casino in the gambling world and the money, Goodfellas. You're basically enjoying, like, not only the excess, but the violence, you know? And yet I'm sure this movie will be falsely accused of being misogynistic and, indulgent in the wrong ways. Yeah, to me, it's like when people, which, 12 Years a Slave won't get this, but if you call 12 Years a Slave racist would be the equivalent. You know what I mean? It's like, it's such if
12 Years a Slave was all through Michael Fassbender's character.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But I think it's so, it's so not black and white in terms of his like perspective on what that sort of world brought down and wrought, that I think it's okay to understand and like like the key for Goodfellas is you have to feel bad for the guy at the end when he's out of jail but having to eat bad Chinese food in a bad suburban neighborhood, so that you can understand the mentality of how these guys operate in the first place. And I think the same is true of Wolf of Wall Street.
Throws you into. I mean, I was saying this last night, but you know, you don't feel like, even though you can watch whatever's happening and go, oh my God, this is obscene and lunatic and kind of ugly in terms of its kind of greed and like, you know, lustful behavior and just total disregard for consequence or, you know, compassionate action or anyone else. But at the same time, I don't feel like there's a distance. The movie doesn't distance itself from the shenanigans.
Couldn't agree more. Well,
it's
because
like
I think
throwing you into this character
yes.
and the way he sees the world and the total kick he gets out of this lifestyle. Just like Goodfellas, like, you know, the Copacabana scene, the, you know, like all of it. You feel like you're walking through this world with him
also,
and loving it.
All four characters, if you look at Ace Rothstein and Raging Bull and in Goodfellas, you see them before they were rich, before they had power, before they had money, and you kind of feel bad for them, and you know they were hustlers and hard workers and had a talent. So when they're enjoying it, you're with them on the journey. But also, it holds up a mirror to ourselves and shows, like, you know what, those guys that we judge, whether it's Wall Street or gangsters, they're not that far from us, because look at how much we're enjoying it. And like, if we don't feel a little bit complicit, it's really not interesting, you know?
Exactly. And then the movie
plus it makes for a much more fun movie.
Right. Yeah. And the movie would feel preachy or lectury, or, you know, like, I don't think I would want to watch a kind of preachy, lectury movie about Wall Street, because I'm like, what are you telling me that I don't know? We were talking about, you know, what Scorsese does and what he did in Raging Bull and Goodfellas as well. All his movies is like identification with these characters who are living these lives outside of society's rules of conduct, you know, and how, you know, he doesn't distance himself, like, admonishing that behavior. He kind of lets you live it, and from within it, feel its consequences and feel the fallout and feel, you know, the eventual hollowness of it. But
yeah, I think in a weird way, it's sort of like any great drug movie. Like, the reason Trainspotting works is because the first act tells you why heroin is so good before telling you why it's so bad. As you know, we've talked about this many times. I think Leo's talented, but I've always thought he had a ceiling, and I've always seen him acting. And one of my big issues, in addition to sort of a slight affect, is that he's, you know, always lacks a sense of humor, almost deliberately, and a lack of like humanity and vulnerability, and it's always slightly artificial. And I think all of that is shed in this movie in a way that I was blown away by. You know, as someone who doesn't expect to love him, you know what I mean? I would, I always like
him. I feel like he's good. I think probably The Departed is the best thing he's done. Or Romeo and Juliet, but I can see Leo acting. I'm like, oh yeah, Leo's not bad in this scene, or, you know, Leo's he's doing the kind of haunted widower thing a little bit too much, or he's jabbing, you know, like he has these little tricks.
He's almost like mechanically a talented actor, but never just disappearing, you know? Yeah. And he disappeared into this character.
Oh my God. And his physical comedy is outstanding.
It's honestly a revelation. Like, for an actor we know so well, it's truly revelatory. And I think, in addition to just having a sense of humor and, as you say, physicality, like, those speeches are so emotional and by the end so, like, human and, like, vivid and visceral. It's
hysterically funny.
It's staggering. Yeah, and hilarious.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really... And Jonah, another guy who has a mixed reputation around town, you know, and is also... What's really impressive about Jonah is he's an LA kid. Where did he channel this
mixed reputation? What is that?
You're trying to lure me into saying something that
No, this isn't something you've said. Just but what's the reputation?
No, just there's you know, I think he is a guy who's gifted, by all accounts, gifted and incredibly talented, but also, you know, not unaware of his talents, and I think happy to be. I think sees himself outside of the comedy sphere in a way that
you're calling him arrogant, basically.
I'm not. I would never say that, because I
love to see a producer squirm.
No, he's mostly a good guy. I'm just what I read in the papers. All I'm saying is, like, where does a Jewish kid from LA get such authenticity with that character? It's like, he also did, I mean, he's amazing. I thought he was incredible. And the casting in general, there's just a confidence that Scorsese brings. We talked about this a little bit. level of the profanity and the nudity and all these sort of facets of the movie that in almost anyone else's hands would have been pulled back a little bit.
Well,
it's just nice when a guy
tell me a little bit about, because I mean I know it's being distributed by Paramount. It's clearly an expensive movie. It looks like $100 million movie, right?
Yeah, $100 million.
But like I know that it received its funding outside of the studio system, even though Paramount is distributing it, and that's why it's able to go as far as it goes. But do you know a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, what I do know is it was financed by Red Granite. Which is, so this is a movie, he's been flirting with this movie since before Hugo. And basically no one, without knowing the exact details, I know that probably people would have touched it at a certain budget level, but not the type of money that Scorsese needs to make a movie. And there's no, there was no illusion, I think, especially after Hugo was frankly a huge money loss, as beautiful a film as it was, that someone was going to let him go as deep as he wanted to in this material for the budget that he commands, which is about $100 million. Whereas Red Granite, a new company, kind of, big equity player based in New York, but, money out of Asia and all these other things, like, they are, aggrandized by the alignment with Scorsese and also the kind of people I think that want to support cool filmmakers' vision and take a risk. I think they, from what I would imagine, know that their investment pays off more than just what the returns are, but just having made Wolf of Wall Street is a company brand thing. You know what I mean? Right. So you kind of need that extra incentive. Otherwise, financially, it doesn't make sense.
And they actually told Scorsese, they told Scorsese and DiCaprio, you can go all out with this. You can show all
DiCaprio found the book. DiCaprio's not just a producer in name only. He found the book before Hugo. He brought it to Marty, and they committed to do it together and went out and raised the money, sort of independently. I don't know. I would imagine there was some kind of thing of like you have Final Cut, but if it's above 3 hours, it has to be between an hour and a half and 3 hours, like kind of traditional parameters. And that's probably why it's $259, frankly, because he probably just met the legal limit and stopped there, which I think you and I are pretty glad he did.
Yeah.
Well, the irony is, I told you, I met someone who had been involved with the film at a high level and who was super proud of it, but I think was so close to it that was like, I was like, oh, it's going to be a huge Best Picture movie before I'd seen it and we'll make a lot of money. And he's like, really? You think so?
Oh, for sure.
I don't know. I don't know that they knew what they had when they made it.
I think it will be a huge hit. I think it's so entertaining. It's possibly the most entertaining movie he's made, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I think there will be a fringe of an audience that, violence is still more palatable to American audiences than language, nudity, sex, all drugs. I mean, this is
very strange to me. That's very strange.
A bacchanalia of all of those things. But it is what it is. I think Departed will be an easier pill to swallow for people. The problem is this is so wildly funny and entertaining, and it'll be such a conversation starter. Like, I brought a friend of mine who actually, used to work in finance and lives in New York and is removed from the film business, and we couldn't stop talking about it for 5 hours, and we still, every email makes a reference to a line in the movie now, I think it'll be a must-see. The way, we've mentioned this, but Django had that same effect, despite the uncomfortable material. It kind of had this word of mouth effect. Even though I think you and I both feel that's a less strong film from a very strong film.
I mean, the things that really impressed me most on the second viewing. I mean, I'm impressed with every single thing about this movie, but his use of music is second to none. I was a bit more conscious of them this time. Just the music feels so integral to the sensory feeling of the scene you're watching that most of the time you don't even notice it's there. And this time I was just trying to listen to it a bit more, like a little blues track here, or he has a way of using music that's so dialed in with the image and what's happening that it's magical. It's amazing.
Yeah, how did you, paying more attention to the music, one, did you feel like it was almost wall to wall, and also did you feel how much of it was sort of diegetic versus kind of just all background, just tonally giving, and was there a consistency or cohesiveness in the music choices?
It's mostly on the soundtrack. It's mostly and just little bits, there'll be the way Scorsese uses blues, when you'll have a slow dolly into something, and then and then suddenly there'll be a kind of riff from a Stones track, and then there'll be a long scene where there's no music and it's just dialogue, like the scene on the boat with Carl Chandler.
Amazing, which is an amazing scene.
Like, he likes to kind of mush pieces of music together. So you'll start a scene with one bit from a song, and then it'll go into another piece of music. And
essentially, it's like all emotionally true in his music choices, rather than like, oh, let's make it confine it to music from a certain decade or a certain genre or a certain feel. It's just like,
I mean, I feel like he knows and loves music and has such a deep library of music. But it never really, I mean, there's moments where it's like, oh, here's a track, But I was gonna say it never feels conscious of itself, like the way in a Tarantino movie, it's like the movie stops and the music comes on, and I actually really like Scorsese's music, but it's very consciously like, here's a song, here's a track, and this just feels much more woven in.
Yeah, it's almost like just a part of the fabric of the scene, rather than let's lay down some images to
it's like the way I felt about Goodfellas. I was like, that felt like a 2.5 hour trailer for the movie, in terms of how it moves. It's like it feels like a highlights reel, and this is a 3 hour long movie, and it feels like a highlights reel just because everything in it is so good. It's like, where are the boring bits? Where are the Where's the kind of connective tissue? At the same time,
what's amazing is he knows he can be confident. There are many scenes that basically, like, the camera is fairly traditional coverage, and it's the scenes and the characters that are carrying you through the humor. Like, it never feels like, I think in every facet of this movie, it never feels like it's a filmmaker who's scared at all.
Oh my God.
And I think traditionally, when you have a movie like this, where the narrative doesn't have that much tension, because you sort of understand the arc that it's going to take, where he'll just let it breathe and like let the camera stay, like, it moves a lot, but there's a lot of times when it doesn't, because he knows that the characters and what they're saying is so hilarious or so compelling or so ridiculous. You know what I mean? And it's just, there's such a balance of tone and pacing. It's actually kind of astonishing, even though, I think it's like not his best looking movie, as like, I've kind of talked about.
I actually disagree with you on that. I mean, I was watching it last night. I thought it looks great.
You can't be right about it.
It looks like a Scorsese movie to me.
I'll show you side to side Casino, Goodfellas, in this movie, and you're like, yeah, you're right.
In terms of its settings and the color and the lighting of Vegas is different to the offices of Wall Street. You know what I mean? It's just
But no, I think it's considering there was so much room for failure, it's amazing how he nailed it.
So, Fred, where do you rank Wolf of Wall Street in Marty Scorsese's filmography?
It's a really hard thing because we're talking about a guy who's made several masterpieces, and I think although we agree wholeheartedly that this is just, at his top and an incredible film, and was blown away in every way, and I can't wait to rewatch it 3, 5, 7 times, I don't think it's a perfect masterpiece, and Goodfellas is one of my favorite movies of all time, like, perfect movie in my opinion.
So number one
Casino flawed, but still the cinema, like, it's all about what criteria you bring into it, and the cinematic aspects of Casino, I think, are just still hold up today in a way that Wolf of Wall Street doesn't approach.
Well, you don't know.
I would definitely put those two. There's too many. I would be loath to rank them. What I would say is,
dude,
it is.
Come on, I'm totally ranking them. If you don't want to rank them, don't rank them. I'm going to rank my Scorseses. You sure? You're going to pass?
You're ready to rank them right now?
I'm full on ready to rank them.
You came in prepped. Okay, what's your ranking?
Raging Bull #1.
Okay.
Goodfellas 2. I would put Wolf of Wall Street 3 after those.
Wow.
I actually think I love Taxi Driver. I think it's a better movie than Taxi Driver. I think Taxi Driver is a great movie, but also quite flawed and rough around the edges, which is part of its appeal. I think Wolf of Wall Street is phenomenal. So I would say those 3, then Taxi Driver, then probably After Hours.
Probably Kundun.
I'd probably go with After Hours, which is a favorite of mine.
Yeah, After Hours is great. By the way,
Casino. You know what? Like, I'd probably put Casino in there. I'd put those.
Casino's a cinematic orgy, and I actually think there's going to be a lot of criticism. It's funny, I've already seen a little bit of this, of Wolf of Wall Street being derivative of Casino, which is so ironic since Casino was sort of held down
I think Casino
a retread of Goodfellas.
A lot of people don't rate Casino as highly as we do. I mean, I admit it took me 3 viewings of Casino over 14 years since it came out to appreciate how good it is.
It's true, but it has aged well. I find that there are more fans emerging of it now in the past few years.
The problem with Casino is it came out so soon after Goodfellas. It came out in '95. It came out 5 years after Goodfellas.
100%.
And it was, everyone just, even when I saw it, I was like, yeah, it's good, but it's kind of Goodfellas in Vegas.
So yeah, it's like hearing a hip-hop song by the same artist.
Right. It didn't feel as kind of like new or fresh or essential as Goodfellas did.
Of course.
And watching it now and like with so much distance, it just feels like, oh my god, like how did I miss how great this movie is?
Did you imagine if Goodfellas came out, a few years after Raging Bull? I think it would have suffered some of the same, maybe not as close.
I mean, I
there's
feel like
a similarity because it's also Joe Pesci and De Niro. There's some similarities.
Yeah, but they're very. I mean, I feel like there's a certain Scorsese style now, which I think really started with Goodfellas. Like if you look at Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, After Hours, that kind of breathless excess, crazy visual, stylistic overload, but in an awesome way, style really began with Goodfellas. Because I'd liked his films up until then. I especially loved Raging Bull. But like what he did with Goodfellas felt like a new kind of chapter in his filmmaking. I
agree. I actually, the way I described Wolf of Wall Street to people, it's the last act of Goodfellas for 3 hours. I mean, narratively, it goes through the exact same structure.
You mean
but energy-wise,
the manic with the helicopters and the cocaine and the meatballs and all that. The kind
with the helicopter and the cocaine and the meatballs, which is. Usually those movies fall apart in the third act. If you look at movies like Boogie Nights and other movies that have very similar up and down trajectories.
It gets like, oh, now we've had the fun, now we have to, for our own moral good, we have to get the really like sucky part where everyone's depressed and it's miserable. And I feel like he doesn't, even though he's actually dealing with that part of the narrative, he still maintains the entertainment and the compellingness of it and the comedy and the enjoyment of it. But manages to make exactly the same
point. I would argue it gets better. I mean, I thought the first half of Wolf of Wall Street is incredibly entertaining and fun, but if I had to say what the weakest section would be, it's probably the first 10 or 15 minutes, as opposed to when it starts when Kyle Chandler, that scene on the boat, which could have been so generic. In fact, in the trailer, you see the section of that scene that is the derivative section, and then when it's played out over the full span, what Kyle Chandler, how manipulative. It's an incredible scene of a moment
that they're both dancing around the whole bribery thing. That's what's amazing about it.
But he's luring him in such a more delicate way than FBI agents are generally portrayed in these movies. But from that moment through the end, it actually hooks in a much more like profound and compelling way. In the section, without giving away too much, when Margot Robbie, who's brilliant in the film, is like also amazing. I don't know where she came from, how
she's Australian. She's Australian and she plays Queens.
No, but I'm saying, how does an Australian nail that accent? It's just the whole thing. I don't know what Marty does to get these people, but that scene in the bedroom, without spoiling anything, and even the way it's shot and the performances, it's just so tense, it's so emotional, it's so raw. Like to achieve that at that point of a movie that was founded on this kind of energy is like. Staggering.
Yeah. Awesome. So
it's nice not to be disappointed by one of the greats.
Wolf of Wall Street.